We only get to play this game once. We only have one life. Gary Vaynerchuk. Time has no backup, no do-overs, and no button to return to the beginning. It makes us more aware, yet more prone to panic. Because when we realize the uniqueness of life, we also realize the fragility of every choice we make each day. Life is like a game where the rules are never fully explained. We enter it without a detailed manual, armed only with intuition, borrowed experiences, and wounds turned into lessons. Every decision is an irreversible move. Every passing day is a turn already used. Most people don't truly live as if they only have one shot. They delay the important things, bury their dreams, and endure what doesn't fit, as if there are endless second chances to fix it. But the truth is the opposite. It is precisely because there is only one life that every moment holds irreplaceable value. One conversation could be the last. One opportunity might never return. A period of youth can slip away and never take that same shape again. Time doesn't take everything all at once. It takes it bit by bit, so gently that people don't realize until they look back. However, the awareness of living only once should not turn into fear. It is not a warning to live in panic, but an invitation to live mindfully. By understanding there is no second time, we begin to choose more carefully what is worthy of our energy. We are less drawn into meaningless things. We become braver in saying yes to what truly matters, and no to the things that are simply draining our lives away. Life doesn't demand perfection from us. It only asks that we truly show up for it instead of living in procrastination, in fear, or in imaginary versions of the future. Because in the end, the greatest regret is not failure, but having lived a life you never truly stepped into. And perhaps when we understand this game only happens once, we don't become more anxious, we become more grateful. Grateful for every choice, every effort, and every day we still have the chance to try, to fail, and to live true to what we believe is worthwhile. Everyone wants to be strong and independent, but few are willing to put in the necessary effort to achieve worthy goals. People love the image of strength, but often fear the price required to create it. Everyone wants to be the independent, resilient version of themselves that life cannot knock down. Everyone admires those who remain calm amidst the storm, walking with a steady gaze as if nothing can shake them. People often crave the result more than the process. They want confidence but avoid facing failure. They want financial freedom but cannot endure the days of discipline and scarcity. They want a steady spirit but avoid suffering even though suffering is the gym of the inner soul. The irony is, every valuable quality is built from uncomfortable things. Muscle is created through pressure. Wisdom grows from doubt. Maturity is formed through loss. No one becomes strong through comfort that lasts too long. Many say they want to be independent, but they really just want the feeling of security without relying on anyone. True independence is the ability to face loneliness, responsibility, and those days when no one is coming to save you but yourself. It isn't as glamorous as motivational slogans. It is waking up when you have no motivation and still doing what needs to be done. It is accepting being misunderstood, failing, and being rejected many times without collapsing. It is persistently sowing seeds through many seasons without seeing results simply because you believe that one day the earth will bloom. What makes most people quit is not that they are weak, but that they want the reward to arrive faster than their own growth. They look at successful people like a sun-drenched mountain peak, but fail to see the bloody feet on the climb up. Everything of value requires a trade-off. Time, discipline, solitude, and the failures that crush your self-esteem. And the majority choose to give up because they want the power without the friction. But life always has a special reward for those patient enough to continue. Because in the end, true strength doesn't lie in never falling, but in the ability to rebuild yourself after every collapse. A person who has walked through hardship on their own 2 feet will carry a serenity in their eyes that no comfort can ever create. And that is when they understand. Independence is not a gift given, but an identity forged with sweat, pain and persistence over the years. Discipline is a repetitive exercise, not once or twice, but until it is finished. People often imagine discipline as a single moment of will, a sudden awakening, a powerful decision, a spirited day of starting over. It is the mundane but relentless repetition where the ego is honed bit by bit in silence. Discipline isn't loud. It doesn't appear like a lightning bolt that changes your life overnight. It is like water dripping on stone, slow, steady, unnoticed, but persistent enough to change the shape of even the most stubborn block. We often underestimate the power of repetition because each single action looks small and meaningless. But it is that very smallness, when repeated long enough, that becomes the thing that defines destiny. The greatest challenge of discipline isn't starting, but continuing when the inspiration is gone. Anyone can wake up one day determined to change, but very few can maintain that when exhaustion sets in and results are nowhere to be seen. When the temptation to let go becomes much more pleasant than the effort to try. And it is exactly at that point that discipline reveals its true nature. It's not the feeling of wanting to do it, but the choice to do it even when you don't want to. Discipline is a repetitive dialogue between who you are now and who you will be in the future. Every time we choose to continue, we send a message to ourselves. I am someone who doesn't give up. And every time we skip it, we are also rewriting the definition of ourselves in the opposite direction. No action is neutral. Every repetition is silently building or breaking a character. The amazing thing is that the power of discipline lies not in extraordinary actions, but in its sheer boredom. Waking up on time, working when you don't feel like it, training when the body is tired, studying when the mind wants to flee. It is all monotonous, repetitive, and carries no immediate glory. But in that monotony, people become extraordinary not because they do something different, but because they do the ordinary long enough that others cannot bear it. And then at some point, discipline is no longer something we must struggle to maintain. It becomes instinct. Like a path walked thousands of times, it requires no thought, no struggle. Only one thing remains: to keep going until it is finished. Anything I've ever done that ultimately paid off scared me to death at first. Betty Bender. The things that truly have the power to change our fate often don't appear in the form of joy, but arrive as a tremor. Fear isn't always a signal of danger. Many times, it is just the shadow of a larger version of ourselves standing ahead. We often think courage is the absence of fear, but in truth, courage is moving forward while your heart is still pounding like a bird caught in a storm. The most worthwhile things in life rarely come gently. True love makes us fear being hurt. Big dreams make us fear failure. Leaving a comfort zone feels like tearing down a familiar home with our own hands. The human brain was built to protect stability. It sees the unknown as an abyss. Therefore, every time we prepare to change, the mind will erect barriers of doubt, anxiety, and procrastination. But it is also at that boundary that life begins to open up. The caterpillar only becomes a butterfly when it accepts dissolving in its dark cocoon. After every time we overcome fear, we don't just achieve a result, we are reborn. Someone who once trembled before a crowd later becomes a speaker. A person once lonely for fear of opening up finally finds love, or a soul once panicked by failure discovers their inner strength. Initial fear is not evidence that we are weak. It is evidence that what lies ahead is big enough to change us. Life, after all, does not reward those who always feel safe. It rewards those who dare to step into their own mist. Because behind the door that makes us tremble the most is often the room containing the most mature version of ourselves. And then one day looking back, we will realize those moments that made us want to turn and run were actually the most worth living. Worrying is simply the constant experience of failure before it happens. Seth Godin. There are people who have never truly failed, yet their minds are as exhausted as if they've just walked through 100 ruins. That is the silent nature of anxiety. a kind of suffering imagined so vividly that the body believes the disaster has already occurred. We are not destroyed by reality, but often worn down by the disaster movies we direct ourselves. When anxiety appears, the brain becomes a pessimistic prophet. It constructs worst-case scenarios with terrifying detail, a rejecting look, mocking laughter, a total collapse. Things that haven't happened suddenly carry the weight of truth. A conversation that hasn't started has already ended in failure in our heads. An opportunity not yet reached is already buried by imagination. They might survive real adversity, but they fall before adversities that never existed. Anxiety is like standing under a bright sun and still opening an umbrella for fear of a rain that hasn't come. At first, it's just a precaution, but gradually the umbrella becomes a prison. People start avoiding opportunities, refusing to change, and shrinking themselves just to avoid the feeling of insecurity. And then the most tragic thing happens. It's not that failure finds them, but that they lose their own lives running away from an imaginary failure. Yet, anxiety is not entirely meaningless. It is proof that humans have the ability to envision the future. It's just a pity that many use that gift to torture themselves instead of creating hope. The mind is like a garden. If we constantly water our fears, weeds will cover the soul. But if we know how to stop, breathe, and look at reality with clearer eyes, we realize most of the things we once panicked about never happened. Life doesn't need people to predict every tragedy to be safe. It only needs us to be calm enough to go through each day as they actually arrive. Because many times, the thing that keeps us awake at night the next morning is just a shadow that no longer exists under the sun. By acting courageously, we become courageous, not the other way around. Humans often wait for some magical moment to happen, a day they wake up and feel completely strong, no longer afraid. But life has never worked that way. Qualities are not born before action. They are forged from action. No one steps onto the stage with a calm heart the first time. No one loves without ever trembling. No one walks into the darkness without their feet stumbling at least once. Courage is not a gift from heaven. It is a callus created after touching fear many times. A common misunderstanding about courage is that the brave person feels no fear. But in truth, someone who doesn't feel fear is sometimes just someone who hasn't realized its depth. The truly courageous person is the one who hears their heart panicking clearly, but still places their hand on the door and opens it. Just as muscles only grow under pressure, human resilience only forms when facing the thing that makes one want to run away. Every brave action, no matter how small, sends a new signal to the mind, I can survive this. And bit by bit, the brain starts to rewrite the definition of who we are. Confidence doesn't come before the experience, it is the ash left over after we walk through the fire. One doesn't become a speaker and then dare to speak. They speak while trembling to finally become a speaker. One doesn't become strong and then overcome loss. They overcome loss while broken to discover a new strength. We often want feelings to change before we act, but life requires the opposite. Walk first. Fear is like a dark room. If you stand outside the door too long, your imagination will turn it into a place full of monsters. But when you step in and turn the light on, most of what made you panic was just exaggerated shadows. And it is precisely in that moment of confrontation that a person is reborn. Not into a version that knows no fear, but into someone who understands they are much stronger than fear itself. Life doesn't hand courage to those who sit still and wait. It only hands rewards to those who dare to tremble, yet keep moving forward. Identify your problems, but give your power and energy to solutions. Tony Robbins. Problems aren't what sink people the deepest. What truly pulls them down is constantly staring into the darkness without moving. When suffering appears, the mind is often hypnotized by the cause. We dissect every detail, repeating what has already happened. A small failure can turn into an indictment of a whole life. A rejection becomes proof that one is not good enough. In an effort to control the pain, we accidentally imprison ourselves in a labyrinth of thoughts. And then we are exhausted not because of the circumstances, but because we've used our energy to dig deeper into the hole we are standing in. Looking directly at a problem is necessary, but living in it forever is self-destruction. Identifying the problem is like a doctor diagnosing a wound. Healing only begins when we focus on the remedy. A ship caught in a storm cannot spend all its time analyzing the power of the waves. It must find a way to hold the rudder. There are losses that are irreversible, but there is always a direction to step forward, no matter how small. The most terrifying thing about despair is that it makes people believe they are powerless. And when a person believes they are powerless, they stop searching for solutions even though the door is still there. Conversely, as soon as the mind shifts to the question, what can I do from here, life energy changes immediately. That is the moment the victim begins to become the creator. Not because the problem disappears, but because they stop giving it power. Life never promised to be gentle, but it always leaves a fragile possibility amidst the wreckage, the ability to choose your response. Maturity is simply understanding that instead of cursing the darkness, we can use our energy to go find a match. You must choose between attachment and happiness. Adyashanti. Happiness and attachment rarely coexist for long in a single soul. Many live their whole lives without ever being truly free because they are tightly bound to expectations, to the past, to relationships that died long ago but are still dragged along like a corpse that refuses to be buried. Attachment is dangerous because it often disguises itself as love, responsibility, or security. We cling to someone even if they drain us, simply for fear of being alone. We stay in a life that no longer fits just for fear of starting over. We hold tight to old memories like a drowning person clutching rotten wood. Happiness doesn't disappear all at once. It is drained bit by bit, like water leaking from a cracked glass. Suffering does not come from losing. Real suffering comes from refusing to let go. A hand that grips too tightly will no longer have the capacity to receive anything new. A heart tethered to the past cannot live in the present. Some people are not unhappy because life is cruel, but because they spend their energy holding on to things that are already meant to leave. Letting go is not a loss, but the act of setting yourself free. Just as a bird cannot fly if its feet are tied to a branch, a person cannot be happy if their mind is anchored to fear or regret. Spiritual freedom comes when we are mature enough to understand not everything we love needs to be possessed. Life requires a choice. Either live in the cage of attachment or accept the pain of letting go to step out into the sky. The moment a person truly begins to be happy is when they are brave enough to release what has been holding them stuck. Not only is heaven within, but hell is also within. It is your choice. Humans often spend their whole lives searching for heaven in a far-off place in money, love, or fame. But they forget that the first place every heaven and hell is born is right inside their own mind. Reality often doesn't change as much as the way we interpret it. The mind is like a fertile but dangerous piece of land. If we constantly nourish resentment and bitterness, a silent hell will form within. A place where every joy is distorted, every success is meaningless, and everyone around is viewed with suspicion. Hell isn't always a burning fire. Sometimes, it's just waking up every morning and no longer feeling at peace with yourself. But also in that inner core, heaven exists as another possibility. Not a heaven without suffering, but the state when one learns to live in harmony with themselves. A grateful soul will find light even on a gloomy day. One who knows how to let go will sleep peacefully without being clawed by the past. Peace doesn't come from controlling the world, but from not letting the world fully control your mind. Many hand over their inner key to circumstances, letting the actions of others decide their self-worth. They live as prisoners in their own thoughts without realizing the door was never locked. Because ultimately, what makes heaven or hell is not the situation, but the soul's response. Heaven or hell doesn't start after death. It starts with how we choose to see, think, love, and exist today. In life, everyone has times of trouble, but when you worry, those troubles double. Don't worry, be happy. Bobby McFerrin. Life never promised to be gentle. Everyone has phases where everything collapses at once. But what exhausts people most is sometimes not the hardship, but the layer of darkness that anxiety casts over it. A problem that originally weighed only a few pounds can become a multi-ton boulder in the mind. Anxiety makes people lose the ability to see things in their true size, like standing in thick fog. Circumstances may not have knocked us down yet, but anxiety has drained our energy before the real battle even starts. We often think worrying helps us prepare for the worst, but most of the time, it only tires the soul. Like carrying a backpack full of stones to climb a mountain, we think we're being cautious, but we're actually just making the journey heavier. Don't worry, be happy. It sounds simple, but it is a powerful internal choice. Happiness doesn't mean denying hardships. It is the ability to keep the light inside even when life is cloudy. A light spirit is how humans resist the cruelty of life. Many things that once made us lose sleep eventually pass away, but the days spent in stress can never be recovered. Therefore, learn to live closer to the present where the tea is still warm and the heart still has the capacity to smile. The greatest courage is sometimes not letting hardships take away your joy of living. The most important thing in art is working. Nothing else is more important than sitting down every day and trying. Stephen Pressfield. Many see art as a mystical light, but masterpieces are built not by inspiration, but by discipline. Most beauty is created in silence, amidst days of boredom and times sitting down when the soul doesn't want to. They look at a perfect painting but don't see the thousands of failed brushstrokes behind it. Inspiration usually doesn't come before action. It appears after a person has started working regularly. The greatest danger for an artist is not a lack of talent, but being too dependent on emotions. It is continuing through the days when the mind is dry that separates the true creator from those who only love the idea. Discipline in art is repetitive and monotonous. It is returning to the desk, even if yesterday was a failure. A river doesn't cut through rock because of the force of one impact, but because of its continuous, unending flow. And then one day, people call someone a genius, when in reality, it is the result of thousands of silent attempts. Art is not a miracle that happens to special people. It is the reward for those who return to it every single day. Our lives are shaped by what we do consistently, not what we do occasionally. Anthony Robbins. Humans often believe their lives will change because of one grand moment, a rare opportunity or a bold decision. But destiny is built from repetitive habits. A human life is the sum of what they do every day. Thousands of water droplets can carve out a canyon. Habits are just like that. One day of effort doesn't create success, but years of persistence can completely change a fate. Time accumulates everything we repeat and returns a result. People often overestimate what they can do in a few days, but underestimate the power of persistence over many years. Every time we choose to try, the brain learns to become more steadfast. Every time we give up, it learns to surrender faster. Life rarely changes with big explosions. It changes with movements that are silent and steady. The future is decided by the things we still do, even on days when we have no motivation left at all.